In early 2011, 29-year-old Dan Saunders of Wangaratta, Australia, discovered something no one expects at an ATM: free money. He'd intended to transfer 200 Australian dollars from credit into savings, but after the machine flashed, transaction cancelled. It still dispensed the cash and updated his balance accordingly. Dan walked away thinking it was a one-time glitch. He returned the next day, withdrew another 200 Australian dollars, then 500 Australian dollars, then 2,000 Australian dollars. Within weeks, he'd quietly built an account holding hundreds of thousands of dollars, all by staying a step ahead of the bank's automatic reversal process. But here's the twist. The real cost wasn't on his bank statement. It was on his conscience. Dan's mornings began with a sinking feeling of dread. By midday, he'd convinced himself the bug would never be noticed. By evening, he'd find himself hunting ATMs across Victoria, each withdrawal bringing a momentary rush and a growing pit of anxiety. Within 4 months, Dan had extracted close to 1 million Australian dollars, using the funds to charter private flights for friends, pay off debts, and even cover motel stays for people who'd otherwise have slept on the street. He justified every extravagant gesture as sharing the glitch, but each act of generosity only sharpened his fear the system would catch up to him. Imagine living with that pendulum swing. 1 hour you're applauded for your kindness, the next you're waiting for police at the door. Dan's paranoia peaked when he found himself tracing every bank transaction on his phone, half hoping the account balance would vanish. He'd wake at 3 a.m., heart pounding, certain the bank's fraud team was at that very moment reviewing CCTV footage of his ATM visits. Eventually, the fantasy of infinite wealth crumbled under the weight of reality. Dan stopped withdrawing. Almost immediately, his accounts were frozen. He faced 3 years of legal limbo, uncertain whether his name would end up in headlines as a villain or a cautionary hero. In 2015, Dan chose to go public. He appeared on national television, laid out the glitch in detail, and surrendered himself to authorities. He pled guilty to larceny by finding, received a 12-month prison sentence, with most of it suspended, plus an 18-month community corrections order, and was ordered to repay approximately 250,000 Australian dollars in compensation. Yet that public confession marked the turning point in Dan's story. He emerged from the legal process without a record of violence, without having hurt anyone, and with a surprisingly supportive community willing to see him as flawed but fundamentally moral. Friends testified on his behalf, praising his large-scale acts of kindness, and judges noted his voluntary surrender and reparative efforts. Today, Dan lives quietly in regional Victoria. He's working on a memoir and consulting on a finance podcast where he candidly discusses the psychology of greed and the fragility of digital systems. He's volunteered at local shelters, spoken at schools about responsible technology use, and teaches basic coding to underprivileged youth. He says he's never been more content living within his means. Moral of the story: unlimited access to money might deliver a fleeting high, but true security comes from integrity. When the line between "that's mine" and "that's not mine" blurs, anxiety swallows any thrill. Dan's experience shows that even a free money glitch can turn into your greatest burden, and that the courage to make things right can restore both reputation and peace of mind. Subscribe for more.